How's it going, everybody? This is Rob Novakast back with another video for you guys. And okay, so I have a long list of videos that I had already set up to be premiered, but I wanted to get this one out of the way. As soon as I got the chance to watch the film and get my review finished and processed, I wanted to get this up on the internet and immediately, just so everybody can hear my opinions on this movie. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, is an interesting way to continue what we've gotten to see so far when it comes down to, the Venom franchise, or at least the character Venom. And I'm going to say, there is a little nugget of I guess, video, or a little nugget of hope for a lot of people that Andy Serkis and the variety of other people that have worked on this movie decided to kind of sneak in and bait people with. So all in all, and I will be talking about that, by the way. For those who've probably seen the movie already, know what I'm talking about. But anyway, like my usual reviews, or at least my movie reviews, I've been taking this piece by piece, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. Starting off with the story, and just so you guys know, there will be spoilers for, especially when it comes to the story section. We'll go into characters, effects, as well as music. So, all in all, this is going to be a fun experience. So, without further delay, let's go ahead and talk about Venom, Let There Be Carnage. So, to some extent, this kind of starts off with a little bit of backstory with Cletus Cassidy, who apparently, while in some kind of asylum, or I guess some type of facility, he has interests for another inmate who apparently has strange abilities. And both of them are separated when she is basically being taken to another facility for her powers to be tested. Inevitably, things go wrong in that situation where they try to transport her. One of the cops gets basically a full dose of her, or at least, to an extent, a full dose of her power, without any cost though, or with some cost to her, because she inevitably ends up getting a bullet in the eye, or to some degree, where one of the cops shoot her. Going to present day, we have our character Cletus locked up for being a serial killer, and Eddie has been periodically trying to deal with trying to get info out of Cletus, because to some degree Cletus likes him, although to an extent it's not sure why. Repeatedly, Cletus ends up having Eddie show up so that way he can be interviewed. But to more of a degree, Eddie is trying to find info on, where some of the bodies could possibly be of his victims. Which, by the way, with the help of Venom, they're able to do that. And unfortunately, for Cletus, since they're in the state of California, or at least to a certain degree, especially with how heinous Cletus's crimes are against humanity, the mayor or governor decides to lift this, or reverse this whole situation where it was, I guess a poor situation to slaughter, or not slaughter, but basically death sentence for criminals. And Cletus was the first one for this. And during this whole situation, Eddie is kind of dealing with certain issues, mostly with Venom. Venom is impulsive, or at least causing him problems, if anything. And it gets to the point where, slowly but surely, the relationship or the bond between the two is kind of slowly fading, to the point where it almost gets violent. Or not almost, it does happen. But either way, For the last visit of Eddie meeting with Cletus, he says a few things that ends up angering Eddie, which Venom then retaliates. Cletus takes a bite out of Eddie and not only has a taste of his blood, but also a piece of the symbiote. Which, unfortunately, we all know where this is going to go. Unfortunately. And with the symbiote, he's able to basically survive death row, or Cletus Cassidy, I should say, and proceeds to massacre everybody, or at the very least, almost everybody in the prison he was in. Which, oh boy. Carnage is a fun character. I want to talk about him more in the character section, but yeah, what they do with him is fun. So yeah, he massacres an entire, or almost entire prison, escapes, and goes to try to find the woman he loves. Which, by the way, in between Eddie interviewing Cletus, he's been kind of sending messages to this person, not knowing if whether or not this person would get those messages, but kind of leaving feelers to see if she would respond to some degree. But she doesn't, or she can't for the most part, till she finally is able to escape. Cletus ends up getting a new look, or at least a new wardrobe, besides Carnage. Takes a car, or steals a car, and proceeds to cause mayhem. And to a degree, we also have a deal made between Cletus and Carnage, that if Cletus helps Carnage, basically because he wants to kill Venom, Carnage can help Cletus with finding the woman he loves, which they agree and proceed to go about their day, ruining other people's day. By the way, there's a moment that I forgot to mention that kind of unfortunately causes the strain of Eddie and Venom a little bit more, and that is this moment where Anne shows back up and unfortunately shows Eddie the ring that Dan gives her. Basically, Dan proposing to Anne, which to an extent pisses off, Venom, but also to another degree causes much distress for Eddie. And because of this whole situation, as well as the botched interview with Cletus, or the final interview as Eddie thinks, they split up. Horribly, I should say. And you have, Venom basically swapping from body to body to kind of live life a little bit. But unfortunately, because, again, the host has to be in a good match with the symbiote, he's going through bodies left and right, unfortunately. So, every time, and it seems like it was, it was going by faster and faster, with each person kind of, dying of, whatever was going on, or whatever Venom was doing to them. And fortunately for him, he was able to, reach to, or be able to reach Mrs. Chang, the old lady that runs the convenience store that Eddie and Venom frequent. At some point, we also, by the way, repeatedly, we also have this cop that keeps popping in, who was the cop that shot Shriek in the face. And he is trying to get info on, continuously trying to get info out of Eddie about what Cletus has been talking to him about. And when he finds out about Shriek, which I think was Frances Barrison, I think was her actual name, they end up trying to find a way to, figure out where she's at. Because, to some degree, the cop thought she was dead. Because, again, she, or he, shot her and presumed her to be dead. So, basically, after this, the race is on to try to find out where she's at. But that's futile because Carnage, with Cletus Cassidy, ends up finding them, or finding her, and break her out. Though, to a degree, there seems to be some kind of miscommunication, especially since her main ability is high-frequency sound, and unfortunately for Carnage, he can't be around that. And it seems like to cause some kind of frustration with him, talking about how, when it comes down to her, she needs to keep down or keep quiet. That she can't do that around him. In fact, makes a threat that he will bite her head off because she did what she did. So they're both broken out of jail or prison or some of the facilities that they were at, and they want to get revenge as well as get married. So they want to basically get 3 guests. One being Eddie, the other being the cop that shot her, and the last one being Venom, because Carnage wants to kill Venom. So at that point, it's them trying to collect the gifts, as Cletus will call them, to each other. Again, that being Eddie, the cop, as well as Venom. Eddie ends up being kind of taken by the police in question, because it's mentioned, or at least by the cop, the main cop, that apparently there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's all around or follows Eddie when it comes down to what happened with the Life Foundation. Apparently headless bodies popping up around all over or around his apartment, and a variety of other situations that involve the same detail. And to an extent, Eddie can't really talk about it, but at the same time asks for his phone call to get a hold of Anne, who, to an extent, after some explanation, understands completely and goes off to find Venom, who, by the way, ends up finding Venom, basically kind of hiding in Mrs. Chang. And there's actually a really funny moment with her where where Venom is controlling Mrs. Chang, and it at first sounds like Mrs. Chang is talking to Anne, shaming her for disavowing Eddie's feelings, but it turns out it was Venom the entire time. It's a funny scene, and in order to get Venom to leave Mrs. Chang, like, no joke, I'm not playing, Anne basically sweet talks Venom to come back to her. It is freaking hilarious. So now we're getting to the closer to the final act, where Venom, after a kind of groveling apology from Eddie, both go to, or at least try to scope the city to try to find Cletus, but to no avail. Cletus is able to capture the cop after actually kind of setting him up, though, and Shriek, or Francis, or Francine, basically goes to Eddie's apartment to try to find him. But when she can't find him, she then proceeds to find something that will get him to go to them, which is, again, Anne. So, after incapacitating Dan, she takes Anne to the cathedral where they're getting married, so to speak. And Eddie ends up meeting them over there. Though, at first, there's a funny scene from the trailer, and I'm so glad that this was still in the movie, where Carnage reveals itself, and Venom is like, "Oh shit, no, that's a red one. No, we're not doing this. No." He's like, I love how like he's like this whole situation where Venom was all for taking Cletus down, but once he sees Carnage, he's all like, "Oh no shit, no, you're not gonna get me to do this." And I love this bit where he's like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna," it's like time to die. It's like, "Yeah, let's kill them." He's like, "No," and Venom's like, "No, not them, us. We are going to die." And it's the comedy itself. By the way, comedy really good in this. There's a lot of funny moments, especially again with the breakup between Eddie and Carnage, or not Carnage, Eddie and Venom. I don't know why I said Carnage, but going further, which by the way, the fight between Carnage and Venom is long and just freaking awesome. This fight was really, really intense. Especially at one point where at some, like, the priest that they kidnapped ends up grabbing, or is being grabbed by Carnage and then eaten so Carnage can expand his body mass, which is honestly fucked up because he killed a priest. But at the same time, it's also more fucked up that he, expands as he eats more, which got me thinking of, like, Carnage, or not Carnage, but Venom doing that and seeing him expand in body mass by eating a ton of people. But anyways, so after that, or during the fight, it's clear that Venom is kind of like on the losing side compared to Carnage. And it gets to the point where Venom and Eddie are pinned down, and to an extent can't really move. And it doesn't help too that not only did Cletus, who basically tells Eddie that he didn't give the full story about how he was abused, but at the same time he still killed a ton of people. He basically breaks or kneecaps Eddie, but really that's not gonna work, especially with, again, Venom. He's able to heal him, but a ton of rubble fall onto Venom, keeping him pinned down. Carnage then proceeds to take Anne and go to the roof of the cathedral, and Venom and Eddie kind of working together realize that there's a huge flaw with Carnage and Cletus, because at some point after using her abilities again, Carnage proceeds to try to kill Shriek, which causes distress for Cletus. And Venom and Eddie realize that they're not in sync. They're not bonded, or if anything, they aren't, to an extent, they're compatible, but at the same time, they're not in sync. So they want to use that to some degree, especially with, though actually, now that I think about it, I don't see how they did that, but anyways, they're able to, with some clever stuff, they're able to stop Cletus and Carnage. They save Anne, though, to the point where Venom is kind of dangling her over a large section of the cathedral, because they're at like the top tower. He slowly extends a piece of himself so she can land safely, as he's repeatedly stabbed and gouged by freaking Carnage. But with one last hurrah, they decide, you know what, especially when it comes to the whole sound aspect, Venom tosses Shriek into the pit, and she uses her powers one last time, causing Venom and Carnage to hide in their house, and they both collapse or fall from the height of the tower. With the help of Dan and Anne, they're able to rescue Eddie. Cletus, on the other hand, who doesn't have his symbiote inside him, basically has the full force of the impact when he hits the ground, and he's just laying there with body broken as the symbiote crawls to him. And before it gets to him, Venom grabs it and proceeds to eat it, and then proceeds to bite off Cletus's head. Now, I say, I there's something I want to say too, because some people will probably, if more people than I think will watch this, some people will probably think of the line that I am forgetting to mention. No, I'm not forgetting it. There's a line that Cletus says before he dies, where he says that all I wanted was a friend, and somebody to understand, something similar to all I want was a friend. But to an extent, I don't see that with Cletus. I feel like that was something to just fuck with Eddie. And literally, Venom is like, fuck this guy, and proceeds to bite his head off. With everything going on, as well as, what the aftermath of what happened. Oh, by the way, the cop got choked out, but he survived, which makes me wonder how. And it ends with him, at least the last scene with him, we see his eyes change color, so it kind of makes me wonder what's going on with him. But further than that, Eddie and Venom at this point more likely will be wanted fugitives and proceed to basically run and hide. And they both of them wish Dan and Anne, the best of luck with whatever goes on with them. And Eddie and Venom go to what I would assume a tropical island. But apparently it's something similar to the comics where Eddie basically ducked and hide in Mexico or something similar. So it ends with them basically, mentioning the fact that they're on the run, but at the same time, as they go about their ways, be the lethal protector to some degree. And both of them kind of now being more in sync than they were before. And all in all, I think that's a good way to end it. Now, for those who don't want me to or want to hear any spoilers of the end credit scene that, again, the creators of this movie decided to put in, I ask you guys to go to a timestamp of the video, because at this point, or at least wait till you see the next section, because I got something to talk about. I want to talk about this. So the end credit scene for this movie kind of gives people hope and kind of I think if anything, it more baits people. So the last scene is Eddie and Venom stuck, or at least inside a hotel room. They're both talking about their own experiences. Venom also talking about how he's basically a hive mind of this, vast network of symbiotes that spans across universes, and offers to give Eddie a taste of that knowledge. Just a little bit, as he says. Because the amount of knowledge that Venom has could blow up his brain. So Eddie kind of says, okay, sure. And all of a sudden we see a flash of light. They wonder what the hell's going on. And to make matters worse, the hotel room that they're in changed. So it's a matter at this point of what the heck is going on. All of a sudden a news report comes up on the TV that they were watching. And it's the same news report of James Jonah Jameson talking about Spider-Man killing Mysterio. Eddie turns into Venom. Venom getting closer and closer to the TV. We see the image of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and Venom, to an extent, kind of salivating a little bit, goes bad guy and licks the TV. So there is a possibility, a strong possibility. It may not be anything, but it could be something. There is a possibility that this may set up that Venom might be in the MCU Spider-Man, or the MCU universe now. So a lot of people, when I was at the theaters watching this, people just freaked when they saw this. Because again, since now the next movie is going into the multiverse stuff, there is a strong possibility we will see Venom in this. Though, to some degree, a section of it will probably be Venom trying to eat Spider-Man. So that should be fun. But either way, the story itself, I thought, was actually really good. The aspects with, kind of the back and forth between Eddie and Venom, trying to coexist, was an interesting one. And I could only imagine, because to an extent, it's like two roommates, together, and their trials and tribulations. So I can understand that, and it was really cool. The stuff with the introduction of Cletus Cassidy becoming Carnage was excellent. I absolutely fucking enjoyed it. As well as his like the way they display his backstory was done really well too. So all in all, story itself was a high note for me. And it makes me look forward to what we could possibly see for either future Venom films or, if anything involving the MCU. So I'm really, really, really excited for this. Okay, so first we should talk about Eddie and Venom, because at this point there's another thing that came up, I guess, recently when it comes down to the movies. And to an extent, I kind of feel like the creators of this film were kind of baiting certain communities when it comes down to the relationship between Venom and Carnage. Now, I'm going to say right off the bat, because this is an odd one, and I'm looking at it. I'm trying to look at it as, playing devil's advocate, if anything, looking at it and looking at what we saw for the film, because a lot of people, especially with this whole bait and switch, or I guess I don't know if it would be called a bait and switch. I think if anything, this kind of this tactic, or what was said, kind of baited people to believing that there was a quote-unquote relationship between Eddie and Venom. And I'm sure people will overthink it with, Eddie mentioning the fact that he loves Venom. I don't think in the sense of like a romantic relationship. If anything, and I think people see where I'm coming from now, I don't think it's a romantic relationship with Venom and Eddie. If anything, it's more of kind of like a bond or a brotherly relationship between the two. I think that's more what they're trying to get at, or at least what they were trying to go with this film. Again, you may think that way, but at the same time, like, that's my own opinion too when it comes down to how I feel. You guys might think that certain people might think it's a romantic relationship, but in reality, my personal opinion, I think it's just a bond between brothers. And more so since, this whole situation. Or, if anything, roommates. And it especially with the characters Venom and Eddie, that's basically one of the story points, is them being roommates. And them kind of ticking each other off. I mean, the first moment we see of Eddie and Venom, Eddie is trying to pull Venom back from almost eating one of the detectives' heads off, or biting one of the detectives' heads off, which is great. And some of the commentary between the two is really good. Venom is a little bit more energetic in this version, which I thought was kind of interesting to do with him. Eddie is kind of more annoyed, again, with the current scenario of him basically, having to live with a messy roommate, as you would say. The whole situation with Cletus Cassidy, Woody Harris plays a damn good serial killer, a guy who would, be a serial killer. And the kind of bond, or not so much of a bond, between him and Carnage is done really well. Like, to an extent, the way it's set up, especially with these two, or Carnage and Cletus, they're both separate entities. They don't bond. And at this point, the only reason they're together is so that way they can get what each other want, or they meet their own goals. So, to an extent, they're not there to be together, or at least bond, as Eddie and Venom have. They're just there to, or at least working together, so they can accomplish what they need to. Shriek was an interesting character, especially with her abilities, and kind of being like a polar opposite, or if anything, kind of damaging to, Cletus or Carnage. Basically being their Achilles heel to a certain degree, more so near the very end, and was played really well by her actress. Though, to an extent, I think, again, my favorite moment has to be with the convenience store. The cop, who we barely see, he just seemed like a dick cop to me. But at the same time, played really well, so I'm not going to knock that too much. Or at least kind of make fun of it too much. I think, if anything, it just... Which, by the way, he's played by Stephen Graham. I don't see him as somebody who is, again, just... He's somebody who's been through a lot. That's, I think, all I'm going to say. So, all in all, that's interesting. So, all in all, characters themselves have been, or at least a lot of the characters that we see, were a lot of fun. They really were. Now, effects, this is going to be an interesting topic, because effects, especially with, I think, if anything, more so with the symbiotes, is really cool. Now, I think the one thing that really got me motivated to saying, like, the effects was what they do with Carnage. Carnage is not like, I mean, the way they animate Carnage, like, resurfacing, is not anything similar to Venom, where Venom seems to, like, leak out of Eddie's body to, come to the surface. Carnage is a totally different being, and I like how they animate him. I think, if anything, the aspect, like, what they did with this character was really cool, as well as the animations that they did for Venom. But then Carnage itself is a really interesting case. If you were to look at that step by step, what Cletus goes through, it seems like his body basically breaks down and reforms into what should be Carnage. It's not like, again, the same way that either Riot or Venom would have resurfaced. It's a totally different method, and it looks amazing. I guess, if anything, especially when it comes down to talking about effects, more of the focus is towards, anything involving Carnage or Venom. And above all, it's done perfectly. Or if anything, like, at least to my opinion, it's done really well. It looks really, it was interesting. It was, especially when it comes down to the comment segments, I really enjoyed that. Everything involving Carnage, what he does to people, as well as, and then another thing that I should probably mention too is this little segment that pops up when Eddie receives a postcard from Cletus, and it kind of gives a almost cartoonish look of giving his backstory, which I thought was hilarious. It was an interesting kind of way of doing things. So above all, effects were done excellently. I have no issues with the effects this time around, if anything, not this time around, but at this, current time with the film. I guess going further than that, I have no problems with the effects of the film. All in all, it was done really well. Okay, so music. I think, if anything, more importantly to me was the score, which, as per usual of any film, I think when things start ramping up was where it gets me when it comes down to music or musical score. In some segments of the movie, they have some rap, which, to an extent, it was interesting. Though, again, my more focus was the score. But all in all, it was an interesting, kind of to put that in there. Also, apparently, fun fact, from what I've heard, apparently, Tom Hardy knows one of the rappers that music was put into the film. In fact, if I remember correctly, one of the rappers actually plays themselves in the movie. So that was really cool. But above all, music itself was excellent. Excellent choices when it comes down to what they played, as well as the score and what was composed for the music played for the score. So all in all, music itself I don't think I have any complaints. There's not much I can really talk about other than I really enjoyed it. When it needs to, it really helps with the emotion. When it becomes more dramatic, it really ramps up. Again, when it comes to scores, and especially when you want to add scores to movies, you always want to get it right. And sure enough, Venom does that when it comes down to getting the music right, as well as the tones it needs for certain elements of the film. Alright, so final thoughts. Honestly, I like the story. The way they kind of set this up, especially with the ending and what end up occurring for our, during this story, pretty much affects everybody, or how it affects everybody, and what we could possibly see in the future for, our characters, Eddie and Venom. We also have a moment where, or I guess, if anything, going further, the characters were great. The bond, quote-unquote bond, between Venom and Eddie grows a little bit more for this film, or if anything, extensively. Cletus, as well as Carnage, were done really well. And the stuff with Carnage was, fucking excellent. Effects were done really well, especially, again, when it comes down to the symbiotes and how they are brought into the limelight. Music, as per usual, is done very well, especially in the areas that it's needed. So, above all, I thought this movie, in of itself, was excellent. I don't think I have any negative points. And again, for those people who may have points that they didn't like, this is just my own opinion. But I think that this was done, in a way, really good. So, with that, with my review of, or trying to conclude my review of Venom, I personally think that this movie gets a 10 out of 10. And it's not because I'm trying to play favoritism or anything. It's more so because I thought that this, again, my own opinion, because I'm, trying to critique the movie, in of itself, I thought was done in a good way. And again, sets up something that could be better for at least down the line. So, all in all, really good. And with that, that concludes my review of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts, leave in the comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. If you guys want to follow us on social media, links are in the description down below. As well as check out our daily content and the weekly podcast. With that being said, this is Rob Novakast signing off. Have a good one, take care, and I will see you guys in the next video. Hey guys, one last thing before we end the video. That's something I forgot to mention. And it kind of makes more sense if it's explained for those who don't know or haven't had much knowledge of Marvel Comics. So, Stephen Graham, as I mentioned, plays Detective Mulligan. And for those who don't know anything involving Marvel, there is a cop named Mulligan in that series, or at least closer to the Spider-Man universe, that becomes a host for a symbiote by the name of Toxin. Now, there's a possibility that by the end of this film, when we see Detective Mulligan and his eyes change color, there's a possibility, or it may, at the very least, it may have hinted that he may have become the host for that symbiote, or a symbiote similar. But that's for, at this point, Marvel and Sony to determine whether or not they are going to do something with Mulligan in the future. Otherwise, it's a really cool Easter egg for those who don't know. But with that being said, again, thank you guys for watching this review, and I will see you guys in the next video.